Everyone go and find a seat. Grab that last beverage. Survive for 30 minutes. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me in the back?
I can hear you.
Good. Anthony? No? Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. This is Drivers of Health Innovation and Artificial Intelligence. I'd like to thank ScaleLA for putting this on and having us here. If everyone give a hand, ScaleLA. I think we're doing, gosh, you guys are just cranking out events. Anybody here last night? A few of you here last night? Look at that. Nice, yeah. So this is awesome space. Our first sponsor I want to bring up and just do a quick intro is AILA. I just saw Todd. There he is, Todd. Come up and say a word.
Hey guys, Todd Rollins here, founder and president of AILA. Who here's heard of what we do? Yeah. Nice. Well, we've been around for 2 years. Only in the last 4 months we'll be incorporated as a nonprofit and we're pursuing 501c3 status. But yeah, we're all about how can Los Angeles can benefit from AI. And so of course this topic is very close to our hearts and we're happy that you're here. And so please, hopefully you'll come out to our other events that we do every month. This February we'll be focusing on entertainment and media. But without further ado, can't wait to hear this talk. So thank you.
Thank you, Todd. All right, so I want to start off just doing quick intros with the group up here. Hopefully, many of you are probably already familiar with who these people are. Go quickly, Kwame Ulmer, guy sitting right beside me here, new partner at Wavemaker 360 Health. Kwame's role on the panel is going to be kind of looking at it from that perspective of VC and investments into the AI space. Beside him, Don Rosen. Don Rosen is former Chief Research Officer at the American Radiological Society. Don's role here is he's been living with AI and diagnostics for the past 20, 30 years. So comes with a lot of experience of what it's looked like actually implemented in the space. And then Wout, I'm going to take a pass on trying to pronounce his last name. CEO and founder of Deep 6 AI. Wout's going to be speaking from the perspective of a startup in this space, what that looks like, the challenges encountered. So before we kind of jump into it, I'd like to do just a quick show of hands, kind of get a sense of what the audience is. So how many of you here are entrepreneurs, like you are starting up a business? Okay. How many of those are in AI or using AI? Okay. College students or people that are just finishing up degrees? Okay. All right. Other business executives, CEOs, COOs? Okay. All right. I feel like I've still got a mix of people I'm trying to guess with that last section. Doctors, people working in clinics? No? A few? Okay. All right. All right. Any I'm missing?
From AA. I think this is
Designers? Oh, there we go. There we go.
Alcoholics Anonymous.
Developers. Developers. All right. Got a few over there. All right. Product managers. Oh. Sprinkling of everything. All right. So we'll kind of dive right in. Just to give you a brief heads up, we're going to split this up into 2 panels tonight. We're going to do our first panel, about 20, 25 minutes. We're going to go have another beverage break there, and then come back for a second. For the second one, I really want to make sure that we're engaging you guys. So if you have questions about what we're talking or what we're not talking about, please sure to capture us in between in that break and let me know. We can I want to make sure we address your questions. The first subject that the group wanted to bring up in tonight's conversation is this idea of AI 2.0. Where is AI going, and where is AI being forecasted to be at in the next several years, specifically in the healthcare space? Maybe to start off that question, and I'll kind of send this one to you, Kwame, first. Where is AI in the hype cycle?
Thank you for that softball. So the hype cycle, so the unusual or outweighed expectations of what AI will deliver, I think it's getting close to the peak, where if you're in a major city like LA or New York or DC, you still have these expectations of Dr. AIs, which we're going to talk about soon enough. If you're in a rural parts of America, I think you It's maybe not so much on your radar, but for major hubs like LA and New York and DC, et cetera, it's still on the uptrend. That's my opinion.
Wow.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, I see it a little bit less macro and long term. What I really see the big trend when I refer to AI 2.0 is actually going away from the idea that you're going to have this omniscient AI that is like a Watson, not to mention any brand, but that basically comes out and saying, I'm going to do everything for you. I'm going to calculate the speed at which elevators can go up. I'm going to do your taxes for you. I'm going to find out which cancer treatment is the best for you, and I'm going to fix breakfast for you in the morning. I think in a way that has been good to put AI in the forefront of the mind of many people and kind of say, oh, there's business applications here. What it has not been so good at is it has presented AI as this platform kind of a thing, right? You take it out as a platform and then you apply it to all of these problems and you solve all of them. What I think we're seeing now is a more judicious appreciation that to solve a specific problem, AI is not enough. You need to have a product that harnesses AI as part of the workflow and as part of actually a whole flow that takes certain data or specific data into account with specific algorithms that actually help you process that data and get you to solutions, and the workflow to make them actually to the users have to make decisions based on that. And I think we're starting to see that now. The one caveat I see, I feel like it's in healthcare, we're still a little beyond that. In potentially fintech and a couple of other and ad tech and stuff, people see much more vertical applications than they see the actual applications of what it brings in terms of value. In healthcare, we're still thinking, oh, there's a platform that can do and find patients with sepsis, and find patients with 30-year readmissions, and find patients with clinical trials, and tell my doctor how to speak into an Alexa and stuff. We're kind of still in that area of it can do everything, but I hope to see that change.
So Don, next one for you. So kind of looking at AI from that perspective, going from AI can do everything. Obviously in radiology, one of the questions that's been presented in the past several years is, will AI replace the radiologist? So diagnostics is leading the field of AI applications in healthcare right now. Do we still have a radiologist that's doing diagnostics in 5 years, or how do we find those other problems that aren't being solved by?
Well, so in diagnostics, it's not only imaging, it's cardiology, ophthalmology, anything where you're doing diagnostics and you're collecting digital information, which is 0 and 1s, we can expect that AI will have a significant effect. You know, I've been to a number of lectures in the last 10 years, you know, where someone gets up in front of the room and says, look around because only 1 of 10 of you will be here in 10 years to do what you're doing today. Well, we still have lots of radiologists doing work and that hasn't happened. However, there's probably 15,000 people in this world who are developing applications and algorithms in diagnostic imaging to replace or to do the job as well or better than the radiologist. And I only, you know, someone once said to me, and I agree with this, that if I can find a tool that can be as good as you are, remember, no physician is 100%, can be as good as you are, works all day and doesn't complain about the hours and what we pay them, then I'll hire that tool in a moment. So that probably is the future, somewhere in there is probably the future, is the future of imaging. You know, we, as in almost all diagnostic areas, whether it's an EKG or it's a CT scan or it's an eye ground, doesn't make a difference what you're looking at. We are, as humans, are used to looking at pictures, right? AI and these data tools, they look at 0s and 1s. So it's really going to, in my opinion, what's going to happen is it'll make diagnosis better because there are things that we don't even understand that computers will be able to do with the AI and come to determination that we as humans can't do. So I think it'll improve what we do. I think that my field, as you heard, I'm a radiologist. I was the EVP of the American College of Radiology. You know, so I constantly was having this conversation with other radiologists. It'll improve what we do. It may not replace us, but I think the field of diagnostics in general will become pathology, radiology, ophthalmologic diagnosis, cardiology diagnosis, and we'll have a new specialty of diagnosticians that use this AI 4.8, whatever it'll be at the time. You know, we'll use, you know, AI and the data that's produced so that we can make decisions and we can treat people. I don't think it'll replace the ability of the human to make the decisions. And again, I don't know, maybe you can help, because as I'm just a doctor, you're a computer scientist, so I don't know when technical singularity will happen, where you'll no longer need the human, but next Tuesday, okay. But somewhere in our future, somewhere in our, at least for the long term, you're still going to need the mind and the human mind to take that data and do something with it.
So I think, exactly, you mentioned that concept of doctors do a lot of complex things and many complex workflows, and this transition from AI will do that whole workflow to AI will be able to participate in different pieces of it. Kind of going back to that transition of, how do we find the right places for AI to fit into that workflow? Or is this transition into AI 2.0? Where do you, as an entrepreneur, kind of figure out, where specific applications do I need to start focusing on, as opposed to, leading into the sale with, AI will fix all your problems?
It's a great question, and it's exactly one thing that we see as a small company trying to sell into healthcare. It's something that slows down the whole process. Because people are still thinking, oh, you come with an AI solution that finds patients for clinical trials, which is what we do. But can you also do this? And we're looking for a platform, and you should talk to my lead data scientist, because we're trying to build something here, and maybe you can help us with that. And it always takes us in the wrong direction. And you try to humor them, say, oh yeah, that's really interesting, your baby is ugly. No, it's great what you're doing. But what it really is, right, is we're selling a product, we're not selling a platform. And it's a key difference that is a hard sell. Eventually, AI is becoming like Excel, right? Maybe, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, you could go say, hey, I have this digital spreadsheet, it's amazing. It can do your taxes, it can do your CRM, it can do all of this, right? It's awesome, it's a difference. But then really soon after that, you have Salesforce. You have a steroids, right? Spreadsheet that does way more than that, as the entire workflow. You have TurboTax that takes your taxes and builds everything around. It's the same thing with AI in healthcare. You can have like an algorithm that does certain things, deals with data, and it starts doing that, say, finding patients for sepsis, finding patients for clinical trials. The key thing is, what do you build around that? It's going from that killer app that solves a specific point problem to turning it into an actual viable product that can empower people on the ground to make decisions and do their job better. And that's where you start to actually have the economics, right? That's where you start to say, I'm not just having this one platform that my IT team has to run for this problem, for something else, because they then become kind of the bottleneck. It's something that is in the hand of frontline users, and it is a complete end-to-end solution. And what you'll have is multiple applications that are all starting from the problem they solve, rather than one platform that tries to do it all.
So Kwame, is WOW just like above and beyond in recognizing this as a business opportunity and taking a startup there? Or are you seeing this across a number of startups?
WOW is dead on, right? Because the companies that we meet with are not saying, we're going to replace the doctor. They're saying, we're going to work on this specific use case in this disease state to aid in the diagnosis of condition X. It's a baby set. It's a product that is solving a real problem for the doctor. And then they'll say, oh, AI can power us to go from this disease state to maybe this disease state. Not so long ago, there was a AI-powered tool to screen for diabetic retinopathy. It didn't take the doctor out the loop, but it helped him screen better for that ophthalmologic condition. So baby steps and product is still the key.
So in the field of imaging, the issue is that there's unlimited problems to solve. And the FDA, for example, has approved certain AI tools and algorithms, but we have a workflow problem. So if you can't have 1,000 different AI algorithms operating on a system, it doesn't exist yet, where you can sit and do your work and have that happen. So in regards to what Howard was saying, we have to also think about how we're going to use it. It's not only, you're right, for years it was, I can build an AI tool that will find a bleed on a CT in the emergency room, and that's a real problem, and it solves a real problem. But now you start layering all the other algorithms on top of that. How do you present them in an intelligent way that can be used? And that's, I think, the next problem to be solved is I think we've proven we can solve problems with AI.
Absolutely.
Right. But now we have to figure out how we're going to practically use those tools in a work, I call it workflow, but in a way that makes practical sense. Yeah.
To your point, Don, part of AI has been driven by capabilities, right? Oh, we have this algorithm that does image recognition really well, and we can find, say, in MRI scans, we can find anomalies. Or we do speech recognition very well, and we can find this, or we can hear stress or emotion in certain voices, we can do this. And we can build chatbots that respond to it. Right now, I think you see a shift where you go, instead of start from capabilities, you start from the problem. Say, what are the real business problems that I can solve with this, and what is the product I build around to harness that AI and build into something that has a true value proposition to the user, and eventually some kind of financial ROI as well.
I was at a presentation of some technologies that we're potentially going to spin out at UCLA, and the professor who was trying to develop this, I asked him how many doctors had he interviewed. I think he said something like 10. And I was in a meeting today with an entrepreneur, and I asked him how many patients had you interviewed in developing your product. She said 400. So it can be this wide spectrum, and getting back to workflow, in the expression there's nothing new under the sun, it still fundamentally comes down to, is your tool solving a problem for the main users, the doctor, the patient? And you have to have that in there.
Absolutely. I mean, it feels like we've got to a point where there's lots of great AI tools out there. All these major cloud platforms are deploying AI systems that are easy enough for even me to get in and start playing with. And it's easy for people to jump in and say, you know what, there's this awesome new deep neural net over here that's great at doing image analysis, so I'm going to go apply that to whatever, CT scans or whatever. But to your point, if you're not figuring out where's the real value add in that workflow, then is that really, I mean, do we need more of that? Or maybe to kind of turn the question around, how do we help the aspiring entrepreneurs here? How do we kind of create those conversations inside of the clinics and hospitals of, we don't need just another imaging platform for skin cancer detection, but we actually need something that's going to help me spend more time with my patient. How do we, what is that on the doctors to try to get those conversations, or how do they make themselves available? They're already overloaded. They're already seeing more patients than they have the time to see. So,
well, when we were in the Cedars Accelerator, right? So Techstars Accelerator, and Doozy was there, I met Don there, a couple of other people, and I remember actually we were scoping. We were basically a solution looking for the right problem to solve. Right? We had this AI technology, but we're saying what should we apply to? So we interviewed 10 doctors, because that's the standard, that's what you have to do, and 400 patients. We had over 500 interviews with people, because the program was great there. And we spoke to everybody, we spoke about AI and the analytics. Everything they told us, that's all great, that's awesome, what I really need is a better EMR. Because everybody hates interacting with EMRs and everything. So one great use case I see for AI is exactly to the point, how can we make data caption, right? How can we make interaction with patients? How can we actually go from 50 years ago, we had this Rockwellian picture of the silver-haired doctor who sits there and there's a cow grazing outside his window, floating on the helium balloon if he's in a 10-story building, whatever. And he's sitting with a small child and talking to the patient. There's no technology, it's all about the relationship, right? To today, where you have the EMR sitting instead of a spreadsheet, instead of a computer, you have all types of machines and everything. You feel like you're on board of the startup enterprise. How can we actually use AI to go back to that picture from 50 years ago and remove a lot of the machinery and basically have voice recognition and image recognition to capture the interaction with the patient, use speech to text to understand what the conversation is about, pull from there the relevant clinical features, okay, the physician says that I have to order this test. We talk about these symptoms. Have maybe a little thing that comes back to the patient on his watch or somewhere else that asks these questions, prompt for this. There are 3 potential diagnoses here. You get this information that will lead to potential treatment, etc. Hopefully, the next wave of technology will actually remove a lot of stuff, will actually replace it, and go back to empower that human relationship.
Don, is that a reality? Is that a chance of happening? We're going to have time to spend more time face to face with doctors, or are people actually missing that? Do people go in feeling like they don't get to see doctors enough right now? And
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, as important as the electronic health record is, the interaction between a physician and his patient has almost been completely changed. Maybe I'm unfortunate that I haven't been to a physician in years and isn't sitting there doing this. Or something. I did see one person who invented something on the iPad so it wouldn't be as intrusive, but it's still intrusive. But it's necessary. I mean, all that data that's being captured. When we first talked, that's what we talked about. There's all this data being captured in electronic health records. and I think it was you who first told me about the graveyard of information.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, people call the EHR the graveyard of all clinical information because you throw it all in there, but there's hardly a way to dig it out. So it's one thing to have all that information, but if you can't use it, it's worthless. So that's so that's the next step, and eventually, you're right, it will be to where we can use natural language processing in other ways to hear those conversations and portray it. Now, I don't see what happened in the city, but maybe you know something like that.
No, but I mean, it's the vision, right? It depends on when it happens. But remember what's the Google chatbot that came out a couple of months ago, where they were ordering out and making like an appointment at a hair lab. It's a very vertical application, right? The feature space is very vertical. Kind of accept exactly what to do. Healthcare is very vertical as well. The taxonomies, I mean, the terms are very well known. So the interpretation, the annotation of the terms, I mean, it's something that we deal with, right, guys? So we know that. Building that into a chatbot, recognizing that is not that hard. There are companies that came through the healthcare accelerator recently, like Avia, and they're working with Alexa to do exactly that. This is now more first empowering patients, so patients can actually talk into an Alexa or something, or an Echo, say, I need another blanket, I'm cold, I'm hot, I'm having pain, I do this, and that will actually be routed to the nurses. And there will be some kind of arbitrage. Is this important? Is this not important? Do I see patient A first, patient B? There's some decision support as well. But then the next thing, it can go to physicians when they're actually interviewing patients as well.
So I have a question, and I want to kind of turn it to the audience here. So we have more time kind of becoming available to doctors, right? So you go in to see your doctor, now they're spending less time in front of the computer, they have more time for you. If I could get that same level of quality through my mobile phone and this amazing AI app, how many of you would just want to stay at home and get that diagnostic through my app versus actually go into the doctor where I know they have more time to see? So for mobile app diagnosis.
Well, it already,
Okay.
I think it already.
For a doctor, going to see a doctor.
Exactly.
Breast cancer.
For your initial presentation, I believe that already exists in Europe in some ways, where there are now health systems where whatever's wrong with you, you pick up your phone, you dial someone at the health system, they have someone who actually interacts with you, and they either, based on their algorithms that have been built, they tell you what you can do, they'll check in with you 3 hours later. In the future, if you need to have a diagnostic test or something, that autonomously driven car will show up right in front of your house and take you to the diagnostic center where you'll go in and you'll be placed. You'll go, before you see the doctor or see the healthcare provider, you actually get what the test is that according to the algorithm you need. If it's an imaging test, they'll put you on a machine that has a little box on it. You've seen the commercial with the cows that go up into the satellites and the jet engines. Well, the CT scanners already are being built with those kind of access, where that box will weigh the patient, so they'll know how much contrast to give, and it'll give the protocol for exactly what needs to be done. They'll go through the testing, and then they'll first sit down and talk to someone if they need to. All that can be processed up front, including when you wake up in the morning and you don't feel well. You may never have to leave your house. You can have things delivered to you.
So our firm's bet is that is the future. And our bet is that not only Dina's hand will go up about being treated in the home, but most of your hands will go up. As a matter of fact, with the ACA and the megatrend of value-based healthcare, we're investing in companies that take a well-understood protocol, research that suggests that treatment in the home is as effective as in the hospital, and we're making a bet on an app or a technology that can facilitate treatment in the home. So we believe in it wholeheartedly, and we want more people to put their hand up and say, I want to get treated in the home. And that's the way our healthcare system is moving.
And I want to just challenge you a little bit. So you're betting on this looking for a nice return.
Yeah.
Right? That technology being there.
Yeah.
I'm presuming that technology may also make this cheaper. Is that what you're also betting on? Is this cost of that level of access is going to go down? Or?
We believe that these, with the right software, can automate protocols and make them less expensive to do at the home with a simpler kit of hardware, for example, or a wearable that monitors your rehabilitation so that you don't have to drive 20 miles to your doctor and waste time and money doing that. So we're betting on scalability, we're betting on big data, being able to compute in the cloud, and all those things to make it cheaper in the home. Yeah.
In a way, healthcare is trying to do a triage, right, of all its operations, kind of saying, okay, when do I need to bring a patient in? Can I do less of that? You have an artificial limiter in healthcare that it's a very regulated profession for physicians. They're very expensive to train, to get on there, etc. And so there's a limit to that. The fewer patients you have to send to a physician, and the more you can either send to nurses. You call it like practicing up to the ceiling of your what is it? Your license or something, right? Where you get the most out of them. Or you even go to the next step is instead of having nurses, indeed, have algorithms do it, have apps do it. Try to get as much as done outside of the hospital because it's way cheaper. Ideally in your home and there, and then only bring them in when it's really necessary.
So imaging, had AI for the past 20 years. Has that gotten cheaper?
Well, I don't know about the past 20 years. I think about the past 20 months.
Okay.
People have been working on it. So, but has it gotten cheaper? I don't know yet. We don't know yet because again, we have algorithms, that have been approved for looking at wrist fractures, looking at bleeds in the head, rib fractures, pulmonary embolus, all sorts of really critical things, but they're not widely spread, and there's not a good work product that brings them all together. But I hate to say this at an entrepreneurial panel, but there's also a social responsibility side to all this, in the fact that we have access here to Cedars-Sinai, UCLA, and USC, but most of the world doesn't have access. And this will be a way to provide medical healthcare access to people all around the world. A problem, for example, is the tuberculosis is a disease that's starting to be spread all over the world. A major problem in the World Health Organization is the spread of tuberculosis. There's plenty of ways to get the images of the chest, but not a lot of ways to get the breath. So, AI is a perfect tool that people can work on, where you can have, a computer, as I said, works all day long, doesn't complain, doesn't take a lot of payment, just some electricity. And, there's a lot of things we can do, and even treating patients. If we're able to treat patients, these are available everywhere in the world. I mean, you can't go, I was in Africa, in some places, I have places in Malibu, my cell phone doesn't work, but in the middle of the Serengeti, I had no trouble getting signal. So, we can, you can really start to think about all the applications in a bigger picture, and we can really take care of healthcare. And the other thing about what you were talking about is if patients aren't going to the doctor and aren't going to the hospital or staying home, we're also controlling disease. Yeah, that's a way to control disease.
All right, off to a good start. We're going to break for 15 minutes. Everybody with questions, please come up right now. I want to grab your questions to make sure we address them. I'm going into this next section. 15 minutes. Okay, guys, let's try to get moving here. Get ready to next section, get ready to kick off. You guys are making your way to your seats. All right, I'm going to go ahead and ask our next sponsor to come up and introduce themselves to begin this next panel. Anthony, where's Anthony? And Johnny. So we have two other guys I want to bring up to talk about their involvement with this evening. Biocom was our other sponsor of this event. I'm going to hand it over to Anthony to tell us a little bit more about Biocom.
Hello everyone, if you could please take your seats as we get started here. Andy would appreciate it. I'll be really quick. I'm Anthony Gonzalez. I'm the Business Development Manager here for the Greater Los Angeles area of Biocom. Biocom is a life science trade association that supports greater development in the industry. Most of the people in Los Angeles are very biased towards LA, so we're very rah Los Angeles. We're very happy to support this evening. I also head the Artificial Intelligence Committee within Biocom, and this is one of our first partner events. So we're really appreciative of ScaleLA and all the effort they put into getting pizza and all of the sponsors that have supported us, and we're really excited to see this as a great precedent in what we can do here locally in Los Angeles. And if you're interested in learning more about Biocom, I'd be happy to talk with you a little bit more offline. I'll be quick, so here's Johnny to talk more about ScaleLA.
So my name is Johnny Lamb. In case we haven't met, I spearhead the business development here at ScaleLA. There's been a lot of things kind of thrown around to our sponsors and our esteemed kind of panelists, but I wanted to kind of thank you guys for kind of coming out here, dealing with the rain, the traffic, to see our beautiful space, and whatnot, right? So, real quick, ScaleLA started about 3 years ago by our founder and CEO, Caleb McPartland, over there in the back. It is a small nonprofit organization called Lincoln Foundation, and fast forward 3 years, we've kind of spun that out to be ScaleLA Foundation, where we mentor underprivileged youth, and we have this now lovely 15,000 square foot space where we're laser focused on helping entrepreneurs kind of scale and grow within the LA area. For our first year, we're laser focused on healthcare, health tech, anything within this healthcare space. And if you have a startup, definitely come talk to myself or any one of the ScaleLA members here or team. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn that back over to Andy. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. All right, so I'm going to shake these guys up. They're now loose. Everybody's had a drink. They're just ready to just get random questions they did not see coming. So here we go. First question, probably the most popular question asked in the break was, who was I? I mentioned everybody else but me. I'm the name down here that none of you can see. I'm Andy Spoon. I am the co-founder at Sierra Labs. Me and Kelly Chu started Sierra Labs a little over a year ago, and we focus at bringing compliance solutions into the life science and healthcare space. I'd love to talk more about compliance for all my compliance quality nerds out there. Holler. All right. So the questions kind of break down. I'm going to break them down into two very generalized sections. I'm going to try to hit as many as I can. I'm a little bit biased. I'm going to start with the ones that interest me first. The two generalized sections were tech-oriented questions and people-oriented questions. I'm going to start off with a people-oriented question, which ties into one of the topics we discussed kind of leading up to this event, which is in this vein of people being comfortable with AI. One of the things that they probably will have to do is be comfortable sharing their health data with AI. And with all the current data privacy, fund, GDPR, Facebook, everybody else talking about how your data is just leaked and owned by everybody across the internet, how do we move towards a society where we need more data to drive more AI, less biased AI? How do we kind of reduce that concern about sharing my health data to enable the advancement of AI?
I'm the village idiot of healthcare and many other things in life in general. But I'll take a stab at it. I think one trend that may help with that is basically consumers owning their own healthcare data. And we see that already, right? I mean, you're collecting data on your devices. There will be a portable EMR. There are blockchain solutions where you can basically have smart contracts about who can see your data and for what, and how can I actually benefit from that. So that's definitely one thing, personalized clinical data and giving the decision rights to the owner of the data, the consumer, right? Another thing is much healthcare information is owned by the physicians as well. If you go to a hospital, the data about you is your data, but also the physicians and everybody. So they have data like you as well. If they use that data to provide better care for you, right, then they can do so. There's nothing that stops them. If they use the data in a non-operational setting, they typically need to get approval from their ethics board or their regulatory board, like an IRB, right? And that's where we operate as well. So when we use clinical data from sites, and we do that to find clinical trials for the patients, right, whose data we use, we do that with the idea that it may not directly affect the patient's outcomes because it's not part of care. There's a research part of it. It may be actually in trying to develop drugs that will take another 5 years to make it to the market, and it will benefit other patients, right? So there is the IRB, there is a mechanic that will look at it and say, does this make sense? Is there a future benefit for it? So I think those are the two broad categories, right? Patients using it directly and can basically, even if they want to monetize it or dispense it when they feel like it benefits them directly, or you have like the traditional healthcare setting where we know what is best for you, more paternalistic to some extent. We will use data to give you better care now, or we will review to see if the use of the data will benefit care to you in the future.
I'm going to come back to questions at the end. I'm going to try to get through these now. Any
Just real quick, we invested in a company called Citizen. We invested with Andreessen, and their whole thesis is around democratizing patient data. But I think fundamentally, this is a role for government. Susan and I spent many years with the FDA, and there are a few institutions that everyone has a certain amount of trust in, and one of those is government. And sometimes companies develop such a powerful brand.
Be careful. I just felt the mood.
Yeah, that's right. For all the libertarians in the house, maybe you disagree with me, but and then there are sometimes companies that rise to the level where they have such a powerful brand and trust mark, people will implicitly put their faith in that company. Johnson & Johnson is an example that despite some rocky roads, they have a trust mark. And I think fundamentally, it's a matter for individuals, they make this judgment about risk versus benefit. Risk of my data being used versus the benefit of healthcare on my phone. They make that assessment in real time. And the only thing to safeguard against that is some sort of trust mark that says this company abides by this regulatory body to try and adhere to it.
So that kind of touches on another question, which is there's a lot of players here. There's big tech, there's government, there's clinics, hospitals, there's community representatives, governors, mayors. Like, who is responsible for kind of bringing these things together in a way to benefit the society? I mean, who is taking the lead? And I guess kind of the other side of that question is, who's willing to put their neck out and be responsible if they do that and it goes wrong? Or I'm going to put my name on the IBM Watson that you just misdiagnosed, all these various different.
In a way, it's an age-old problem of externalities, right? Anything that happens produces externalities. It may have a certain goal, but it has other side effects that affect patients or whatever. And traditionally, the main role for government is to manage externalities. So it should be a government role. The problem that you have is that advances in technology outpace the ability for governments to keep up with it and to think about, well, how is it going to affect the future? When people were talking about Facebook years ago, it seemed like a very benign thing. Right now it has an impact that goes way beyond what it was intended to do. And government is still catching up and trying to do that. Ideally, and again ideally, you have a government that's very cognizant of this and that has an ethics board, much like that regulatory board, right, that tries to follow all of these technological advances and thinks about what could happen and has a broad area of expertise to kind of think about the future and think about how this can play out. And they actually have an advisory role, not just as a regulator, but also advising companies before it comes to that point.
John? So speaking, I kind of think of it from your eyes, so being part of the American Radiological Society, you have a voice with a little bit of the decision makers in the space. Did you guys see a role in trying to help shape the AI applications or bringing it to a broader basis? Or
Well, I guess I'm no longer, I'm retired, so I'm no longer part of the American College of Radiology, but what the college did proactively is they started a Data Science Institute. And that Data Science Institute, one of its charges is to not only work with our members and radiologists, but work with the FDA and other government agencies. So the FDA has started a series of programs to look at AI, starting with development tools, the National Evaluation National Evaluation System for Healthcare Technologies, which has just invested, I think, $800 million in, which is a way to look at all these new technologies, a pre-certification program, and most importantly, market surveillance program. So once you introduce these, so this is the kind of thing, for example, our society is working with the FDA in their efforts to try to regulate it and figure out how best to look at it. They have a pilot program with NEST looking at CT pulmonary scans, looking for nodules, lung nodules. Scanning has become a very contentious but prominent way of lung cancer screening. So they're trying. There are many folks who are developing AI tools to look at those nodules and try to figure out whether there's a way to predict better than just serial following them over time. So it's yes. I think I don't think that the American College of Radiology is alone in doing this. I think most organizations probably are participating in the way they can. We're sort of at the forefront because radiology is where people have identified AI as being something that's going to affect medical care. I heard a presentation recently, and they were listing the current uses of AI. It's just a general presentation. They had Netflix, Facebook, autonomous vehicles, and radiology. Those are the only 4 they listed, and I was shocked. Okay, well, so it's we had to do something because of its prevalence. But I would imagine, and you guys can correct me, I think most healthcare entities understand that AI is something in the future. I'm sure they're all working, I hope, with the governmental agencies to figure out how to regulate it and what to do.
one more question on the people aspect before we move over to tech, and this wasn't asked by the crowd, but I think it's a very interesting topic, is how to address bias in AI, and how do you, and looking at it from a lot of different perspectives. One is, how do you create these source data sets that allow the AI to handle a diverse population, a diverse demographic that it's being applied to? But on the flip side is, can AI actually detect bias, or is there a way for the algorithm to be aware of whenever it's like, this only really works for people with light skin, or this only really works for males? Is that a problem with the source data? Is it a problem with the people overseeing the AI algorithms, instruction?
All right, well, I'll go ahead and start. So, there are different flavors of implementation of AI, right? So one flavor, which I see a fair amount of, and Alan, I don't know if Alan is here, he's with a startup, Giant, where the app is helping you walk through well-understood protocols to figure out what your runny nose really needs. And I use this app, and you figure out, oh, I need to go see a doctor because I have a fever and a runny nose. So and then there's maybe a limited amount of bias in that scenario. The more sensitive area is when you have an algorithm to screen for diabetic retinopathy, but the data set has a limited number of African Americans. Right? And so right now the scenario is we have a data set of 30,000 people, only 2% were African American. We're going to put that on our label and inform the patient that these are the people who are studied. There's no real stick. It's just trying to inform the patient and the doctor as much as possible. I think that's a limit in our system, and we can do better with incentives to, for example, fast track a technology that has data that's representative of the population that you're trying to serve. Fast track approval of a technology by the FDA. That's one way you can incentivize systems that work at eliminating bias.
I think it's, again, going back to the NEST and the FDA, one of the things in their documentation is that they're looking for diversity of data. It's important.
So you can put out a lovely press release saying we need more diversity in clinical trials, but how do we enable that with this awesome technology tools available to me? How do I get access to those?
You call them out.
Absolutely.
I mean, it seems like it's representative of the hospitals that are willing to share their data sets. And are those the inner city hospitals? Or are those the hospitals that are 98% affluent neighborhoods?
When you talk about bias exists at many levels, right? And you can think about AI, is it going to perpetuate existing biases or is it going to create new biases? And it all depends on the application. It depends on where you get your data, but also who has the funds and who actually has the economic incentives to start with AI first. And is the AI that, for instance, going to be applied, say, at the Mayo Clinic or at MD Anderson, which are high-level institutions, that gets trained there? Do you apply that then to inner-city hospitals with a different population? How long will it take for that AI to adjust to the new population and come up to speed? It all depends on all of those drivers. In something, and I don't know what the answer really is. I mean, it really depends on the deployment rate, right? And access to the new data and actively and aggressively pursuing other populations so you counter those biases. What I do know for clinical trials, there is an existing bias, right? I think probably if you look at population distribution, actually clinical trials are typically skewing towards white males. And that's kind of it. It's hard to get many other patients on trials. Many chronic diseases are selling mostly to different demographics than ones they're being tested on, because the population is completely different from the cohorts of people that make it into the trials. What technology can do is make it so much easier to find patients and can make what is today prohibitive, like going to, say, an MLK, right, or a community hospital that doesn't have the means, doesn't have the manpower to spend hours sifting through patients and getting into clinical trials, and doesn't have the manpower to start doing trials. Technology can shortcut all of that and say, like, we know you have the data, we know the patients, we can now bring those sponsors that want to increase diversity on their studies to you because we know you have those patients. And here are the tools to find them in minutes instead of months. And here is an economic model that you can actually do to do it cheaply and bring revenues. So technology can help overcome bias, but it has to be done by design. It's not going to happen overnight.
I'm going to kind of leverage off that last point and start pivoting into some of the tech side of this. So I have a AI deployed that is detected to have some bias in it. Do you see that the future of these application-specific AIs needed in the workflow are continuous learning? Is that a requirement of these AIs to be able to continue to improve over time and feed them new data and continuously to improve the outcomes?
To an extent, I mean, yes. I mean, ideally, yes, but it depends on what you're doing with the AI, right? And as I said, AI is part of an overall product and an overall delivery. As the data changes, the algorithms that you train on the data should also change. They should reflect what's under there. And as you start grabbing more data and become more precise, you can do that indeed. You can basically have a more tailored model. I mean, these guys know way more about it than I do, and we're trying to play with them. The thing there is, to what extent do you take the learning from one data set and use it in another data set, right? So you can actually learn more. And we were thinking about that, right? We have basically different lives. Eventually we'll have more access to different populations. Are the things that we train at one hospital, right? Say like some hospitals use shorthands in their records and we say we find patients this way. Do we deploy that to other hospitals as well? Or will that create a different bias because they don't recognize this?
So there's a capital can play a role in this. There's a startup based out of Washington, D.C. They have a database over 8,000 African American men. They collected them because they went to where black men go, the barbershop, right? I still go. What power would be in taking that, and these are black men that they want to measure their blood pressure to help reduce it, right? And to refer them to hospitals like the MLK. My friend from the MLK is here, right? So a business relationship where they get so he's raising a seed round. That's why he was talking to me, right? And so he says, Kwame, we want to leverage a relationship with hospital systems so that we can extract more value out of this database of 8,000 black men. And isn't that a great source of potential enrollees for the next heart disease clinical trial? Barbershop stuff is getting big.
We're actually going to be doing haircuts in the
Can I get one?
So switching kind of back into the tech side, Don, you in the previous session.
I don't think I can.
Oh yeah, you went deep on tech.
I haven't been to a barbershop in years.
So you kind of alluded to the graveyard, which is EMRs nowadays. One of the questions was, looking back on EMR's rise to where it is, the prominence it's achieved, is AI on track to do something similar? There's similarities of where we see AI and the tech around AI right now is what the EMR journey was.
That sounds like your question. Okay, back to your stuff.
I think it depends, right? I mean, AI is a method, whereas an EMR is a product. And it's, again, an EMR is there to solve specific things. I think AI is becoming prevalent. Like I said before, AI is going to become like Excel. Your phone has AI, your car, your fridge will have AI in it. I mean, everything will be part of that. So it's going to become prevalent and polyvalent. It can take many forms and do many things. Will it be a class in its own that gets solved? I don't think so. It's going to be part of EMRs. And it's going to be part of other things as well. It's going to be part of scanning software. It's going to be part of other stuff. It's going to be part of chatbots or whatever. I don't think it's going to be a class just in
It's like a product. It's not a product you buy. It's an application.
It's embedded in other products that solve specific problems.
Although I've been told now that there are black boxes that I can purchase. And if I have a problem, I can create my own AI question, and as long as I have the data to feed into the training set, it can actually answer questions.
It fixes your life. Think about Watson.
Perfect segue into the next one. So the cloud vendors, so the AWSs, the Azures, Google Clouds of the world, are they creating the right products for you to go after that next generation of AI? Are they providing the tools to generate those specific?
It depends on what the tools are. There's many open source tools. There's many applications. There's many background tools you can use. Yes, we use cloud vendors. We deploy in their stack. I mean, we have a lot of things that they help us with. Azure is trying to build a library of algorithms as well that you can basically pick, right? I mean, we started in the intelligence community where we built a tool that we call like a curator that would allow you to take different data sets, apply different, say, annotators and algorithms to them and build them into recipes and do that. And I see that's something that cloud vendors are taking over. So in a way, they're operationalizing different AI tools. Yes. Are we using them? We're using them more for other stuff, for the databases, for the other stuff, right? If there are open source tools like Amazon's in the comprehensive NLP, yeah, maybe we'll use it. Why not?
Is there something they could do to change or to provide more functionality for more? I mean, because they're sending lots of data, right? So they're deploying data in their own tools, but they're also deploying systems for collecting and mining even more data from their clients and customers. Is there something
question from Jeff Bezos? Keeps on asking us, what can we do for you?
I mean, is there something that they could do to help you get there faster?
Well, absolutely. I mean, what we could see them as a channel partner, right? healthcare is one of the slower industries in embracing cloud technology. Right? It's all like, oh, I don't trust the cloud. Having an invasion of my data is terrible. It's very expensive under HIPAA regulations as well. But in the last 2 years, which is coincidentally the 2 years we've been doing this, you see kind of a shift towards cloud acceptance. And where it used to be everything had to be on-prem, now it's, well, it can be in the cloud, but it has to be my cloud. Pretty soon it can be in the cloud, right? So I see that happen. And I do believe that say, vendors of cloud solutions can help basically create an environment just like an iPhone is basically an app store, right? Where we can go to these hospitals, we take the data, and all types of third-party applications can live there and can be applied to the data. You want to say something?
That was very good.
All right, I think the last one I had here, this was actually for you, Doug. So this one was on...
It's not software, right?
No, this one is... maybe there might be a software, but there's software with everything.
Yeah.
Cancer imaging.
Yeah.
So using AI to go in and try to predict recurrence of cancer. Is it there yet, or is there... do you see a future where we'll be able to kind of predict a reoccurrence, even if I leave the hospital, the doctor says, we've cured it, even though it may still be there?
Well, it starts first with the diagnosis, predicting recurrence. Diagnosing cancer. I was just talking to someone in the audience about radiogenomics, which is the ability to take images and the data in those images, look at that data of anything, and compare it to now 1 million people who have, let's say, a lesion in their kidneys and all that information in there, and then those that have disease compared to a genomic signature, and all of a sudden you have precision medicine. That's what we're looking for, and then you have precision treatments. It used to be that if you had something that treated 6% of the population, they took the data, they threw it away, they took whatever the compound was and stuck it on a shelf, and that was the end of it. But what if you're one of those people in the future, and they can identify something that takes that genomic tag and applies it to the actual the data information of all the different qualities, and then that's something that's really relevant. So then you take that to the next stage, diagnosis. Again, I'm of the belief, now this is personal, I'm of the belief that the data that's in an image is much more, again, the image was created for an eye, not for a computer. And I think the data that's in that image, those zeros and ones, contains lots of vital information that if you train, it involves training sets, right? You train, and then you continue with machine learning, that we will be able to diagnose, and obviously going forward, you'll be able to follow up, you will be able to compare time points to each other. We do that now visually. There is software that exists that some of the major radiology vendors have created where I can bring up similar slices from the same, on the same patient at different time points and compare them and measure them, and I can put that bridge put into a form. But this is going to be a higher level of this. This is going to be where now all of a sudden that information can be applied again over thousands, 10,000, 100,000 patients, and we'll be able to infer through machine learning, what that means.
Maybe one thing to that, because I think it's a really relevant thing. If you look at 10 years ago, everybody was talking about big data, right? Big data. I think what big data brought us was really the denominator. You have many types of data, you have lots of data together, and you have it for many patients or many things like this, right? So you have a denominator to use as a baseline. What AI and machine learning brings to that is the ability to find numerators in there. It's like, what I have in 5 million patients, I can find a patient that has exactly these criteria, and now I can find another patient exactly like this, and that can bring you to that whole precision medicine, right? For patients like this, in my entire population, for my collective medical intelligence, we say 7 billion patients at some point, even for rare diseases, I know there are 1,700 patients across it that are exactly like this, based on how machine learning can infer all those tiny differences in the numerator across those patients. And then you can indeed go to precision medicine and use those other 1,699 patients to kind of say, well, what should I do with this patient? What happened to these other patients previously in time, right? What were the right diagnoses? What were the right treatments? What were the prognosis? What is the distribution of outcomes that seems applicable for this?
All right, so that's all the questions I have, and I think the time for that main session. I do want to kind of take the last minutes we have, and maybe I can ask India to help circulate the microphone for us in the audience. And put some audience.
I had to put my beer down first. Here we go.
Hanford, India, everyone. This is
Does anyone have a question to ask the panel tonight? So, could you say your name?
Hi, Shyam Nandarajan. My question's about specifically both the technical side and the clinical side for radiological images, particularly MRI. There's a lot of dissimilarity amongst scanner types, amongst protocols and imaging protocols. Do you ever see like how long until a lot of that scanner protocol, different scanner types, all of that information gets standardized in a little bit of an easier way? Because right now, the company that we're looking at is looking at prostate MRI, and there's a lot of variation amongst even different parameters. And talking to experts in the field, they don't seem to think that it's ever going to be a solved problem.
So my background was running clinical trials for pharmaceutical, biotech, and medical device companies in terms of their imaging, the imaging part of their trials, and that was what my business was trying to come up with standard ways. We couldn't standardize the scanner, but we could standardize the protocol. We could standardize the protocol, the amount of contrast given, and encouraging sites around the world to work inside the envelope, not outside the envelope. That's what clinical trials is about. I don't know that there'll ever be one standard, because that's just against capitalism itself. I don't know that that's possible, but what will happen, and as I was talking about earlier, the patient though will be able to standardize, what happens to the patient and the protocol that's used to some degree. That's my opinion. Although recently I went to a meeting where someone who's really one of the most renowned radiologists in clinical trials was talking about how that's going to happen at the local level. That all the people decide what's best for their patients, and that's what they're going to do. If that happens, we need AI and machine learning more than ever, because that way we can do the comparison. I don't see that ever happening unless someone regulates it, and I can't see anybody ever regulating that.
Don, you won the award for saying machine learning. We've made it through the whole session. Thank you. That was the only mention of machine learning at the AI session. That was pretty impressive.
Is there anyone else that has a question for the panel?
Simon Lin from Nationwide Children's Hospital. My question is from the viewpoint of healthcare providers. If we look at the rear view mirror, the implementation of the electronic medical records, European Union is much more ahead of the US, and it took the US 20 years to really make it happen and cause a huge burnout for our physicians. Now my question to this panel is, for AI, where do you see, in terms of implementation, do you see US will lead the world this time for AI? How long do you think for the AI will be able to see physicians happily practicing?
Could you repeat the last part?
How long will it before we will see the physicians start happily practicing their medicine with AI?
It's already happened. I mean, it's already.
Right, but it's not widespread. It's happening, in my field. It's happening in ribs and grams as algorithms are approved and being distributed. I wish I had that crystal ball. I would do something. I know Kwame really wishes to.
Yeah.
You can decide who to invest in.
That's right.
I think it's the whole. Was it sort of addicting, right? The future is already here, but it's unevenly distributed. It's happening in some places at some scale, and it will become more widespread as the unit economics catch up. And that sounds a bit as a cop-out to some extent, but what I sometimes think when we're talking about AI and different applications, right? People started talking about a general AI, an AGI, and like that was kind of the claim of Watson, all this, right? We have this cognitive computing, we're doing all of this. Instead, we're seeing small point solutions, and at some point they may converge and they may become powerful enough to solve bigger problems and actually have the usability and have the context switching that allows them to actually interact and become more part of the entire workflow. I think it will happen, but I think it's something that, it's a convergence, right? It'll take some time for that to do. But in a way, the human brain evolved in the same way, right? Our brain is basically a collection of all local problems or algorithms that it solves, right? It has specific problems that it knows to solve, but it's tied together. And we have our brain center that tries to kind of control it and gives it a sense of unity. I'm told that if you take LSD, that goes away. You feel one with it. Don't try that at all. But so it's the same thing is to some extent true with all of these algorithms. They may come together and they form a sense of a whole. They may actually start being more part of an overall workflow. But it's that mix. We had evolution that brought us there, right? Here it's going to be probably those solutions working together on a shared platform and tying together.
Just for all the sponsors this evening, that was an endorsement. I think we have one more question.
One last question.
Louis Pital, Robert Zichem, and I wanted to ask about, when you mentioned who owns the data, I want to thank you first. It was a very generous panel, a very hopeful discussion, which we all need in healthcare especially. So, who owns the data? You mentioned the patient has the right to own their own data, but you also mentioned the provider or the doctor. Because right now, it's all housed not as a doctor and not necessarily. So
it depends, right? And if you're part, and you may know this better than me. If you're part of a bigger health system and they give you all the systems, they capture it. In many cases, the health system that owns the data. If you're part of a smaller clinic, you're the physician, you own it, right?
very small sample.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One more in the
Is there
back.
one more question?
Hi there, Sam Kim, I'm a physician as well. Wow, this has been, I think you really do have your finger on the pulse of where physicians are within this whole AI and how technology integrates into our workflow. And so I have two questions. I have one, my first question for Dan and Wout is basically, when you talk about AI and integrating into the workflow process, how much of it are you considering the fact that the workflow is broken in the first place? Number one, right? And then also because medicine is an ever-evolving field, and our understanding of the human anatomy and pathology and everything, this is why medicine is always evolving and changing. And how does AI account for that, right? I think AI has become very good for the FedExes and UPSs in terms of automated routing. But my second question is where does AI fit into identifying the anomalies and where we are where our blind spots are essentially to help assist and advance medicine and the evolution of clinical care. And actually my last question is we talked about talking to physicians and everybody complaining about EHRs, right? Mm-hmm. Where does AI fit into creating a more automated workflow so that it's not as painful for us as physicians, right? Because in the last 2 decades, EMRs have been kind of forced upon the physician and they've been forced into this workflow that we don't agree with and have no say in as a stakeholder. So it's really frustrating, and that's why the market is so fragmented, and nobody has come out to be like unless the U.S. government says like, hey, we're going to be using Epic or Cerner, and everybody has to fall into line. It's never going to happen, right?
Yeah. I'm going to start with question 34. You're absolutely right. So when we were talking to physicians, the one thing we heard often is like, you know what, EMRs have made hospitals more profitable, but less productive. Because it turns physicians who are qualified to actually take care of patients into data entry people that have to sit there, type stuff in, look it up, etc. It kills the fun in a way, and it kills the spontaneity of dealing with patients in many ways, right? And I hope what you're seeing is a transitory moment where you still have to have that human data entry. One of the key things where AI or speech to text or other things could help with, right, or even indeed image recognition and stuff, would be with automating the data capture and then stopping physicians from having to do it themselves. That's a no-brainer, right? So that will help with that. When you go to the next one, I think it's question 27, about how do you do that anomaly detection. That is one of the things that AI is good at, right? That's the whole thing that it's there. It's pattern recognition and finding the outliers and stuff like it. And that goes back to, as I mentioned, having big data as a denominator, having more data to compare against. If you're one physician, even though you have been trained, you have a limited data set or a limited baseline to compare. If I see this patient with a rare disease, if I've never seen a patient with porphyria before, I'm not really sure what happens here. And you do your differential diagnosis, you go to different things. So having access now to, say, 50 million patients that your system has trained on, or even if you connect all those systems together, 7 billion patients eventually, it can help you with that recognition. And it can actually maybe suggest certain diagnosis, clinical decision support, a lot of things, right? So that is probably going to happen. I mean, it's absolutely going to happen.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
I mean, I feel like, you know, we keep thinking about how can AI help when you kind of touched on that. Sorry. You kind of touched on, well, how can we redesign workflows? How can we redesign these experiences? And how can AI be a part of that? Rather than starting with what AI can do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's like, you know, making sure we're taking that step back and broader picture.
So most of the companies that we deal with say, we're going to take this part of the workflow and reduce the time to execute it by 50%. Rarely do we see a company say, we're going to take the physician's workflow, blow it up, and create a shorter workflow. Because redesigning workflow is inherently a people and cultural phenomenon. And no AI powered software is going to solve that, right? So I think it's not particularly the right question. It's a cultural question of redesigning workflows. I don't think any company is going to say we're going to blow it up and do it.
Yeah, I just feel like then in that case, AI just becomes a Band-Aid.
That's right.
Well, I would disagree in that, you know, I think it goes back to what Webb said earlier. AI is not a product. EHR is a product. And the reason, I can't remember another question. EHR as a product, you know, you say, was not forced upon us as physicians. The government figured out that if they paid us to do it, we'd all buy it. So they gave us meaningful use dollars, and we all jumped on board, took the money, and then were stuck with what we got. And you're right, there was no standard. It was just spread across all sorts of companies, and I don't know of many physicians that are very happy they now have it. Okay, so I agree with you on that. AI, on the other hand, to me, maybe I look at this wrong, is a technology. And it's a technology applied to something, in this case, big data. And it's not like we're going to go buy AI, but people are going to figure out ways to apply AI to a workflow. They may come up with new workflows. They may use the old workflow, but it will not be adopted in our medical care unless we figure out how to make it a workflow, you know, based on the experience that we've had with the HRs, right? We're all kind of like, you know, we want to wear garlic around our necks to present the next thing from, but you know, this is not a product. It's a way of improving workflow and improving diagnosis and improving treatment and improving patient throughput and all those things. I think it'll be applied to workflows, not a hindrance to workflows, but I'm an optimist.
One quick point to that.
Yeah.
I think, Lucy, you're absolutely right that most workflows are contingent, right? They're not there because they're well designed and will be perfect. They're basically there for historical contingency. It's the best we can do or whatever. AI and other techniques and other products can actually shortcut that and make it better, and they will change that. And it's true that the acceptance rate, you have some momentum that you have to build to overcome that. But if you go to people and say, you know what, normally I spend 6 months trying to find patient clinical trials, scanning through all the records manually, right? I love it, and you're giving me a tool that allows me to do it in 30 seconds. I'm not going to do it because I have to change my habits. No. If the pain is big enough, they will adopt it, and then they'll do it.
Yeah.
All right, I know this is a great conversation. Unfortunately, I can't work these guys more than 25 minutes a session. More time. I want to thank you guys for coming tonight. I want to thank the panel. You guys are awesome. Thank our sponsors, ScaleLA. We're going to stick around. These guys are going to take off as fast as possible. possible, so try to catch them. But I'll be back by the drinks. Have a good evening.